Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm so pleased you're here. And so I hope you've had a good week. I have had quite a fun week. It feels like it's been a full-on week the past week or so. I was at the World Alcohol Free Awards stand at the London Wine Fair on Monday, which was lots of fun. So it was really good to see that there was so much interest in alcohol-free drinks. So on the stand, some of you might remember I was a judge on the World Alcohol Free Awards, and we had entries of alcohol-free products in all categories. So beers, spirits, wines, and other alternative drinks. And we had products from 21 countries, and there were 31 judges, and it was just a really great experience. So I thought I would support the World Alcohol Free Awards and be at the stand. I spent the day speaking to people about alcohol free drinks. So the stand included the gold winners, and as there were so many gold winners, there were some really exciting drinks. So if you haven't yet checked it out, go to worldafawards.com/results, and you can see all the drinks and head for the gold ones and then see which ones you would like to try. I think it's always fun to explore the drinks, and as I said, they're from all over the world, so you can take your pick at what you would like to try. And it was so lovely to meet up with people and to meet so many people, but also catch up with people, for example, Yaz, who's been on the podcast from Align Events, and then also Laura Willoughby of Club Soda. And of course, it was lovely to catch up with the directors of WAFA, the World Alcohol Free Awards, Chris and Chrissy. What I found really interesting was I spoke to someone who hadn't been to the London Wine Fair since 2019, and he couldn't believe the number of stands and the selection of alcohol-free drinks that were on offer. And so it definitely shows, and it feels like the alcohol-free movement and the alcohol-free drinks industry is growing quite significantly. So we should watch this space and see what happens. And I think that if you are thinking of taking a break, one of the things that I discovered early on, and I encourage all my clients to have in their alcohol-free toolkit, is an alcohol-free drink that they like. It just enables you to not feel like you're missing out. And also, from an inner child perspective, it helps you trick the mind, your subconscious, to feel like you're having an adult drink. It's in a pretty glass. And so actually, by having an alcohol-free drink, you can really continue to enjoy yourself and not really think about it. And of course, as a last point, anything 0.5% ABV or below is alcohol-free, because that is the equivalent of a ripe banana. So feel free to go out, explore. As I said, I tried and tasted so many products in March when we were judging the awards, and obviously they were blind tasting. And so it was good to actually see all the products that had won gold and support the World Alcohol Free Awards. So if you are interested in that, head to the website and check out the different drinks. I'll put the link in the show notes. And as a reminder, I think I mentioned it last week, but there is still time. If you're listening to this early on Thursday, there is still time for you to save yourself a seat on my free live online masterclass, which is how to take a break from alcohol even if you don't think you can. And so it's happening today, 23rd of May at 6 p.m. So you can save your space in the link that I'll put in the show notes, and or you can just message me, send me a message via Instagram, or feel free to email admin@thrivealcoholfree.com, and you can save your seat. But I can't wait to see you there. It's really exciting to be doing this masterclass and hoping it's going to help. I'm going to share 3 reasons that might be stopping you from taking a break from alcohol. I'll also share the first 3 things to include in your alcohol-free toolkit. I actually have 8 things that I suggest you should include in your alcohol-free toolkit. So I'm going to give you 3 of those on the masterclass, and then I will also share my step-by-step system to take a break from alcohol and actually enjoy it. So sign up straight away so you don't miss out. And if you are listening to this afterwards in the next week or so, then get in touch, as I will be able to share the recording with you, but it will only be up for about a week. Okay, so today's guest is Heather Danby, and I met Heather about 6 months ago, maybe, and she is so lovely and she's got an amazing story. So I wanted to get her on to the podcast. Heather also has her Sharing Out Loud podcast, which is available on Apple and Spotify, and I was delighted to be a guest on her podcast, and so you can listen to that if you on her Sharing Out Loud podcast, and you can hear a bit more about my story. Heather lives in Chicago with her husband, daughter, and her dog Theo, and they have a son who's in college, and she has been alcohol free for 5 years. And so it's a really interesting story. She's a delightful person. So I'm really excited to have Heather on. So without further ado, here is Heather. Hi, so welcome, Heather. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you? Thank you
Yeah,
for having me.
well, thank you for being on. And, I was honored to be on your podcast as well,
Oh,
Sharing Out Loud. So,
so
yeah, so it's
fun.
lovely to have you on the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. So, how are things? You well?
Things are good. Oh my gosh, I just got chills. I'm so excited to be here. As I told you, I'm a little nervous, which is crazy because I talk to people. I love to talk to people. I don't know why I get nervous, but I do. Yeah, things are good. Even when life throws punches and weird stuff's coming at me from all directions, I'm not drinking, and that makes life good.
Um,
Yeah, I am 49 days out from being 5 years sober.
Wow, that's
So I'm really, yeah,
fantastic. That's a real
yeah,
milestone. five
it
years
is.
is amazing. Yeah,
Oh my God,
wow.
when I first started, when I woke up that day on March 21, actually it was March. Okay, let me make something clear. It was March 20, 2019, but I was so hungover. No, no, no. I was still drunk from the night before, and it
Yeah.
wasn't even a bad night before, but alcohol was still in my system. So I did not want to be the 20th of March to be my date. I made it the 21st. So it's March 21, 2019 is my date when I said I'm done and I don't want to live like this anymore.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'd love to hear that. So maybe that's where we
Yeah.
start. I'd love to hear this. Take me back to what led up to that date being the date when you said enough's enough.
Yeah, so I had what people would think would have been a rock bottom. Not a lot of people know this. I think I've only said this once on another podcast, but I did drink and drive. Nobody else was in the car with me. And I got into an accident, but it was with myself. And I still didn't stop drinking. That did send me into, oh my God, I don't want to start to cry because that's a really I keep that very close to the chest. I keep it very, very tight. It's not that I don't want people to know me, that I'm not really open about things. It's just really hard to talk about. You
Yeah.
and I just talked a little bit about moving on and trying to move
Mm.
forward. Some people say when you go to AA, you hear people's stories or you repeat your own stories. I find that by doing that, it is absolutely a helpful reminder, but I cannot do it all the time because I will live in a state of such deep and utter shame, and I can't do that. That's not allowing me to grow. That's not allowing me to flourish.
Mm.
That's a great word, actually. I'm going to start using that more. Flourish.
Yeah.
Because whether we decide to be alcohol free, sober, whatever the term is, alcohol conscious that we just talked about,
Yeah.
whatever the term is, we need to be in a headspace where we are allowing ourselves to flourish. So I don't often talk about that being a part of my story, but it is
Mm.
because it's kind of a big deal. I didn't stop. I went to rehab.
Mm.
My dad came. I was home with my son, but he wasn't with me. My daughter was with my husband in Florida. And so my dad actually came and stayed for a week. And I got myself ready to go and I went to outpatient rehab. It's part of my story, but it's not even worth talking about. I have some negative feelings about that rehab. They really didn't help me. It was just not, it's not even that I wasn't ready. I was ready. It just wasn't the right place for me to go. So I went out back drinking again, and then I went into another rehab, and that was pretty good for about 6 months. That was the longest that I stayed sober
Mm.
until till now, until I decided that I was done for good. So, Dupe, I caused a lot of wreckage, a lot of wreckage, and it went on for about 6 years. And my husband and I were nightly drinkers. I mean, that's just kind of what we did. I really loved to cook,
Mm.
and I would have a glass of wine while I cooked, and then we would have wine with dinner, and then we would have wine. I always had a glass of wine sitting next on my bedside table. Always, always, always. And so did my husband. He didn't have a problem. He did stop. He stopped when trying to get me to stop, not because he had a problem, but because he wanted me to stop. He did,
Mm.
however, realize that he was definitely alcohol dependent.
Mm. Yeah.
Didn't have a problem, but he
Yeah.
was somewhat alcohol dependent, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So it was a really, really weird time for me. There was, oh my God, I don't even know see, this is where I get like, where do I go with this? So there was a lot going on. Actually, this is a really good place to, I guess, tell you what was immediately going on with me during that time. And then we can go back into my childhood and not spend 4 hours on the call. But so I've always had depression, always my whole life. I think looking back, some of it was hormonal, and looking back, I
Mm.
gave you a snippet of some other things that we'll talk about. So I had really, really bad postpartum depression with my son. I almost died during childbirth. I hemorrhaged giving birth to him. And then a number of things happened. I really wanted to breastfeed. My milk didn't come in. He had colic. I didn't bond with him for a really long time. And for years, I remember getting into a fight with my husband one day, and Nolan was in the high chair in the kitchen, and I literally threw myself down on the floor under his high chair, and I just sobbed and sobbed and
Mm.
sobbed. And instead of dealing with the underlying condition of my mental health and the whys and what had brought me to that, aside from the birth and the trauma from that, I was just given medication, similarly to how menopausal women are just given medication rather than dealing with the actual estrogen leaving their body. But we'll get to that too. So it got to the point where I was so over medicated, and I was actually told to increase my medication right before my period. So I was like on ridiculous amounts of antidepressants.
Mm.
And guess what? I was drinking too.
Mm. Yeah.
You're not
Right.
supposed to mix the two at all. So that went on for a number of years, and then I had my daughter, and actually things got a little bit better. But a couple years after that, uh, I don't think you know this. Someone tried to murder my husband.
Wow.
And one of our tenants, we own apartment buildings here in Chicago, and I won't go all into the circumstances, but don't get me wrong, my drinking was bad anyway. I worked in the world of advertising,
Mm.
and it was just one big party. You and I talked about this. It was traveling. All expenses paid. It's cocktail hours at the office. I was Miss Cocktail Hour. I was the queen. I had the cart in my office. I had the music. We always had fun.
Yeah.
And so anyway, when this happened to my husband, I I think I've pinpointed that's when things started to go horribly, horribly wrong. And while he was okay, and he fought the guy off, and amazingly he didn't die, which was his throat was slashed.
Go on.
Pretty
Wow.
amazing story. Instead of him spiraling, I seemed to spiral and went
Mm,
into another weird form of, not weird, just coping.
mm,
And then it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And my husband could see it even though he was drinking with me every night. But one key component here that people should know is that it wasn't just drinking. My personality started to change. I was fun at one point,
mm,
but what happens, I believe to be true, now that I'm looking back and diving in, I'm going down rabbit holes with all this research, is that for women, as your hormones change, we also don't process our liver, everything. We do not process alcohol the way that we did at one point. And I never processed it well. I mean, I had fun and all that, but I was always on medication. So that was always messing everything up. And I always felt like I was getting more drunk than maybe I should have been with the amount of alcohol that I was drinking.
mm,
So what happened in my 40s was that I would even just have 2 glasses of wine and I would start to be really drunk. And then you add on a whole bottle of wine, and I was raging.
mm,
The anger and the destruction,
mm,
I would start texting people. I would start Facebooking anybody who ever hurt me and whoever what I felt like people that did me wrong, I would just rage. And I was angry, 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 angry.
mm,
And yeah, so we lived in this life of, I might start to cry again. I would pass out and my husband would be left to put the kids to bed. And my son would watch him crying in the hallway. My daughter didn't really, she says she doesn't have any recollection of what went on because we talk about it. So let me make that very clear. I talk with my kids about this stuff. So, I mean, for years, there were fights, and I punched my husband at one point in anger and drunkenness. I would be drunk and I would leave the house in a blackout. I haven't talked about any of this actually. And I would walk across to the park that's across the street from us, and he would have to follow me and coax me home. And I mean, just some really, really bad, bad stuff. I mean, I blacked out a lot. I was a total, total blackout drinker at that point. I was suicidal. I tried to commit suicide a couple of times. I was in a constant state. My job at that point, at one point, I was let go from my job, not because of drinking, just layoffs. And I just never went back to work. And I was living a life of desperation, not knowing who I was, not thinking I was good enough, not thinking that I really had anything to contribute to my family, society, no one. And I was constantly saying to my husband, you all are just better off without me. The kids everyone would just be better off without me. So he didn't divorce me. We talked about it. We were angry about it. We fought a lot. And then one day, my savior, so back in 2018, so this is like 6 years of this.
mm,
There's a lot of years.
mm,
So in 2018, September-ish, my good friend from my old advertising days, she had gotten sober and she had reached out to me after seeing my crazy Facebook messages and just all nutty shit that I have since deleted. I went through my entire Facebook account and deleted everything. She reached out and I think we went out and had lunch. And this is a woman who almost died. Her liver was failing. She was jaundice. I mean, it was pretty gnarly. And she asked if I wanted to go to a meeting. And I did, an AA meeting.
mm,
And I drove an hour out to the suburbs. And I did this for months. I went one day a week, and then I went 2 days a week. And I would stop drinking, and then I would start, and then I would stop, and then I would start, back and forth, back and forth. But what had changed, or maybe not what had changed, maybe what I knew all along is, Dupe, I wanted to be sober because deep down, nobody wants to be in that much pain. I was saying you all would be better off without me. Would be better off without me. I was just in so much pain and I just wanted the pain to go away. And
mm,
I didn't know how else to make that go away. I wanted so desperately to stop, but I didn't know how to stop.
Mm.
It was just this, it was an addiction. I truly feel for me, I have a very, very addictive personality, extremely addictive personality. So when I glob onto something, I'm going to go all in. It's also, I guess, passionate. When I'm passionate about things, it's kind of the same stuff. I didn't know how to make it happen.
Mm.
So I continued back and forth, back and forth. And finally, we were having people over for dinner one night. And you could see if I was driving an hour to the suburbs and an hour back, rain, snow, any kind of weather, I was
Mm.
trying. So I really wanted it. And I had a great support system.
Mm.
But until you're absolutely ready and there's some light bulb that goes on, it doesn't have to be a rock bottom. It doesn't have to be a rock bottom.
Mm.
So I was making dinner. We were having people over, and I had, I don't know, 2 glasses of wine, maybe three. I don't know. I was drunk by that point. Again, my body, hormones, I don't know what was going on, not processing it. Doug made an excuse for me as they got there that I wasn't feeling well. I went up to bed, passed out. And the next day I woke up and I said, I had had this medication called Antabuse. I'm not a doctor. I can just say, go to your doctor. There are lots of different medications out there for ways to help you stop drinking if that's right for you. Antabuse is something that makes you very, very sick if you take even a sip. I think even if you use hand sanitizer, I was never even going to risk that. But I had had it for 3 years. I didn't even know if it was still good anymore. But I was like, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. Or actually, no, because I still had alcohol in my system and you can't have alcohol in your system. But I woke up the next day. I called my friend and I said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. My husband didn't believe me. I woke up the next day on the 21st. I popped the Antabuse and that was it. And I was done.
Mm.
And I went to meetings, same 3 days a week, sometimes 4 days a week. And I was committed to make a change. And that's it. That's how I got sober.
And you
And
did make a change. It's 5 years.
yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So sorry, that was kind of long and drawn out, but I hope people see that from that, that again, you don't have to have the rock bottom. I had a rock bottom.
Mm.
I drank, I drove, I got into an accident, wasn't arrested, thank God. That should have been my rock bottom. That should have been my moment to stop. Yes, I wanted to stop. I thought I was ready, but I just still didn't.
Mm.
So when I stopped, it doesn't look like a rock bottom. I
Mm.
just was so tired of being sick and tired. That's an AA thing. I'm so tired of being sick and tired. You get to the point where you're just exhausted.
Mm.
You just don't want to do it anymore.
Mm. Gosh.
So,
Well,
and then you have to deal with the aftermath. And I wrote this in a post yesterday that I know not everyone likes the term one day at a time, but for me, this is really, really important. And do you know, I just realized this yesterday. It wasn't like I had thought about it. I just was writing and I was like, holy shit. I had never thought about this before. One day at a time isn't just for drinking. One day at a time is to get through the fucking wreckage of
mm.
everything that you've done.
Mm.
So my husband waking up every day, not believing that I was going to get sober, the pain of that was almost worse than the pain of waking up with a hangover and say him just being disappointed again.
Mm.
It took 2 years, 2 years before
Mm.
he trusted me.
Wow.
Another year of, can I trust her? And now I don't think he thinks about it.
Mm.
So my one day at a time was, I have to get through these feelings of worthlessness and uselessness and just utter guilt. Otherwise, I won't be able to make it. So that was my one day at a time. I
Mm.
knew when I was done drinking that I was done.
Mm.
I knew I wasn't going to pick up another drink. So the one day at a time was for me to just get through the wreckage.
Gosh.
Every time I talk about this, it gets worse. Meaning I share more than what I usually do. I'm sure
Well,
that there's lots more I haven't shared, but
well, thank
yeah.
you. I mean, thank you
Yeah.
for sharing so vulnerably. It's going to help the person listening. It's going to help lots of people, I'm sure, just to hear that story. And I think it's just so interesting because you talked about depression, you talked
Mhm.
about the stress and anxiety, and a lot of people don't actually correlate that alcohol exacerbates all those things. It exacerbates stress, exacerbates
Yep.
anxiety, exacerbates depression, and it also, if you're going through perimenopause and menopause, it is also the worst thing because, to your point, you said that you weren't processing the alcohol the way you used to, but you don't because your body is trying to do so many things with
Mm-hmm.
you going through perimenopause and
Yeah.
menopause that it's in sort of overdrive, and alcohol's not helping in any way. And a lot of women, to your point, your doctors don't actually ask how much you're drinking before they're prescribed with antidepressants, especially around the perimenopause menopause time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that starts to mask all of their symptoms, and you don't know what's real and
Yeah.
what's not, what's actually causing it because of the alcohol or what's causing it because of the hormone changes. And there is just so much there that it's just really interesting that no one really puts two and two together, because
Yeah. And I
alcohol in
think the
so many
same,
ways just isn't helping women, especially
oh
sort of
God, no.
40 onwards.
Nope. Nope. And I think about, oh my God. So add postpartum in there and
Yeah,
just,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
I don't mean just postpartum depression, add
Mm,
postpartum. These
mm,
babies come out of you
yeah.
and your hormones are so jacked up.
Yeah.
You're so messed up.
Yeah.
And so women drink to cope.
Yeah.
And then I don't even want to go down the path of mommy wine culture. So many
Yeah.
other people are talking about that, but
Mm,
that's what it is.
mm,
We'll have a drink. I need it, or this will help you, or God knows I need it, or I hear even, oh my God, I was just listening to a podcast the other day and it's like, well, of course mommy needs her wine. And like, that's not funny. It's just not funny. And then I think about women who are having babies in their 40s. So you're actually in perimenopause,
yeah.
but you're having babies.
Mm,
Think about your hormones, and then
mm,
you have a baby. And then what does that do? And then
yeah.
you start drinking on top of that. Again, not a doctor, but I've been around long enough to see that none of that is a great recipe for health
No.
and mental health.
Mm,
Not at all.
yeah, absolutely. But to your point, you can't tell anyone or say to anyone that this is the time. It took you,
No.
you said it was 2016 when your friend came in and saved the day and started inviting you. But it wasn't until 2019 that you finally
Yeah.
said enough is enough. And so everyone needs to go on their own journey. And
Mhm.
do you think everyone's journey is what helps them become who they are? So
Yeah.
if we can take the lessons that life is working for you and not it's not happening to you, then it's the positives come out of it. But it's just so common that people use alcohol, and you talked about your husband as well, and thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that, because it's always interesting to sort of hear how the relationship is.
Yeah.
But you described your husband as alcohol dependent, and I imagine the majority of people, when you get to sort of your 30s, late 30s, 40s, 50s, all of us are alcohol dependent because we've been
Yeah.
drinking for so long, and alcohol is an addictive substance. So you get more addicted to it as you go. And again, people just don't seem to realize and appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, you shared so much, and I'm just so sad that you got to the point where you felt that you were better off not being around.
Oh, I
And
have a friend who called the police because she was so afraid from my texting, and the police showed up at the door because she thought I was gonna hurt myself.
mm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, again, I'm sure that was just the mix of everything you were on as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to do with
100%.
you as a person. And you know that
Yeah.
now, because 5 years
Yeah.
on, you're a completely
Yeah.
different person. And the person
Yeah.
I've met is,
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that. So,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And
Yeah.
this is the other reason why I thought this was an important conversation, because a lot of the people that I speak to haven't hit the rock bottom that you
Yep.
described.
Mm-hmm.
I work with grey area drinkers. I don't
Mm-hmm.
work with people who need medical intervention, need to go to rehab. But
Yeah.
the point that you made about it's so easy for anybody to get to that point, and you hit a rock bottom, but actually that didn't change anything for you. You carried
Yeah.
on. So being conscious of all of the things alcohol does and what
Yeah.
it is really about, and it isn't good for your health, it isn't good for your heart, it isn't all the things they say it is. You don't need it to relax, you don't need it to be a good mum, you
Yeah.
can do without it. People need to hear these things in order
Yeah.
to start thinking about it at least. And then listen, I'm not anti drinking. If you want to, if you choose to
Right.
drink, that's fine. But I think you need to be mindful of what you're really, the toxin that you're putting in and the impact it
Yeah.
has on your body and your life and your
Yeah.
relationships. And for your husband as well to not believe you for 2 years. You must have felt like you were in a prison for
Oh,
those 2 years.
it was beyond terrible,
Mm,
beyond. And I kept talking to my friend who was my sponsor, AA at the time. I just kept saying, when is it going to end?
mm,
And she just kept saying, all you can do is just keep concentrating on yourself.
mm,
Just don't drink. That's all you can do. You literally have to just live your life.
mm,
And I was happy. And believe me, I was always involved with the kids' school. And I was a mom that everybody else kind of, oh, yeah, she's at everything. She volunteers for everything. I was working at for a long time. I was always working, I always had a full-time job. And so I was better than I used to be.
mm,
So, but when someone watches this person go down a path of just massive destruction, just you can forgive, it's just harder to forget. And I think over time, you have to see what happens. And I didn't know if we were going to make it. I
mm,
honestly didn't. And I wouldn't have blamed him if he had said, I can't get over this. This is all I'm seeing. I wouldn't have blamed him and we would have gone our separate ways and we would have figured it out. So it's a lot for any partner
mm.
to take.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So what's interesting though, and I guess I would love to talk about is what you do versus AA. I wish that at the time, I really wish that instead of the drinking at the 1-year-old's birthday party and all of those things, what I really wish at the time was that there was more help for parents on how to raise a child, not just throw a book at you and just say good luck, send you home from the hospital, good luck when your baby's crying and your milk's not in and you're like, oh, I don't have formula because was told I wouldn't have to, I should be able to breastfeed, all these things, right? Nobody, you're really not prepared. Maybe you are more now. I don't know. My kids are older, but back then they really weren't. And back then, let's say 10 years ago, had there been sober coaches, there was literally AA, and then there was a thing called Smart Recovery. So one of the rehabs, the one that I went to for 6 months, and that was a great program. They believed in both, but Smart Recovery, it's just not well known. It probably is now with Zoom and all of that, but having a coach, having this person who, I mean, I was in therapy and got nothing from it. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I got more, as I was telling you before, I just did timeline therapy with my friend Becky Parker, who is a certified hypnotherapist, life coach, and timeline therapist. And I got more out of an hour and a half session with her than I did in my entire life of therapy. We were able through this timeline therapy to, because I've always, Dupe, I've always wanted to know, and maybe this is where sober, actually, I'm sure this is where sober coaching comes in. I couldn't pinpoint why the hell did this happen to me? I kind of still playing the victim. Why did this happen to me? Was I born this way? Is it in my blood? My brother's a recovered addict, alcoholic addict, 30 some years. He got sober his freshman year of college. That's crazy. And so all of this time, I'm like, why? And it wasn't until the timeline therapy that we went back and realized that in third grade, this is interesting. And this is based on a conversation that my dad and I had, that my dad decided to not take a salary. He had started his own business and he wasn't taking a salary for a year. I just found this out last summer.
Mm,
My mom went back to work. Third grade, second grade, for some reason in elementary school, I was pulled aside to go to see a therapist in the school. And my parents to this day will tell you they don't know why,
mm,
but there must have been something. Then we pinpointed, I actually had an accident. I like couldn't get to the bathroom in time in gym, and I stood there and basically just like peed in the gym. It was terrible. My mom had gone back to work, and the neighbor had to bring me new clothes. So in this timeline therapy, we pinpointed that my mom going back to work, not being there when I got home from school, my safety net, not to blame anyone, but it probably triggered something in my childhood that put me in a place of vulnerability, being scared, fear, all of these things, because it was after that my self-esteem took a dive. I discovered alcohol, if anybody wants to know, in 7th grade, and then it was off to the races. I was probably 11 when I had my first drink, tasted it. And then more things happened. I mentioned to you earlier, I was 15 or 16 and my mom and I were out in a snowstorm, which is not unusual in Michigan. I drove to school in whiteouts. That's just what we did. School was never canceled. We had so much snow. And we were driving to go somewhere and we came upon an accident and we were first on the scene. And it was my brother's friend and he had hit a little girl and she was pinned under the car. And I'm sure she had died instantly. But there's trauma. And then my brother got into a really bad drinking and driving accident in high school, almost killed himself and 3 other people. There's trauma. Then he went to rehab. There's trauma on the family, right? And then actually there were a lot of other things after that too. And then my husband, someone trying to murder my husband. And I feel like, well, shit. I had a sober coach, maybe, just maybe, or someone to say early on. So before I got sober, to help me recognize those things. I mean, literally in 90 minutes of timeline therapy where I was floating above myself at different points in my life, looking down and feeling the emotions and what was happening at that time and how that impacted my social life and all of these things. But strangely, I didn't drink in college. And I started drinking after college. So there was a point in there. But obviously, I know you're not a therapist. So there is a component of therapy, maybe if you have the right therapist. But I would think that what you do for the right person can be even more impactful than something like AA, which I totally believe in and totally love. So for me to say that is a big deal. But, there's not one right way to get sober. You need to find what's right for you.
Yeah.
But doing this investigative work about the whys and don't stay in the past, like you said, you got to move on. But I also feel like maybe I've been a little stuck and I needed that in order to really move on and be like, okay, these things happened to me and okay, because it always bugged me. It's like, why did this happen? Why did this happen? I don't know. What do you think? What response do you have? Because I'm just blabbling. It's not even a word. Blabbling.
There's so many. Gabor Mate, he's the trauma guy really, and he talks about the big T's and little T traumas and the impact it has. And then there is the 10 questions quiz which people can do, and if you tick 4 of those things, then you're more likely to be alcohol dependent. And so trauma is absolutely something that triggers people wanting to potentially drink more, because fundamentally what people find in alcohol when they start drinking is it numbs all of that out, so they don't have to deal with it. And people numb out the pain for years and years and years. But what they don't realize they're also doing is they're numbing out all the positive emotions as well as the negative emotions. And so they're not really feeling, so you are walking around in a bit of a grayed out life because you are numbing. And if you've been drinking for years, then the likelihood is you numbed it all out. So when people then stop drinking, take a break and decide they're going to do it, I say to them, they need to think about their why, as in why they want to stop drinking, not why have they been drinking for years. We don't talk about that initially. And then make that decision. And as you say, you can't bring anyone to that point. They need to get to the point where they make that decision and it's their choice. I'm not going to force anybody to stop drinking. That isn't my role. But if you decide that you want to take a break, then I'm happy to help you. But you make that decision, you get to the why, and then I say it's all about making not drinking a non-negotiable. That is the focus for the beginning. And things are going to come up and emotions are going to come up, shame and guilt and resentment and all of that comes up. Absolutely. But for the first 2 to 3 months, we're not going down that road. We're going to focus on all the tools that you can build in your life to not drink and actually realize that you are only gaining, you're not giving anything up. And it's all about looking at limiting beliefs that surround alcohol, fears that surround alcohol, really understanding what alcohol is and what it isn't, and what it's really doing to our bodies, so that you clearly can get to the point where you see those negatives and you're then started to retrain those neuro pathways. And obviously with neuroplasticity, our brains are amazing, so they can start to see as you go through these benefits happened, or when I did this, this was actually fun. I encourage journaling and people to really notice how they feel and write down something good that happened that day and what they're grateful for, and keep it as, and then go back and reflect on a regular basis, so that they can start to build up that knowledge and strength and actually that mindset that alcohol isn't something I want to do. I want to move on. But then fundamentally, the challenge that people have, other than sleep, we can go into sleep another time because sleep can vary. But the challenge people have is that they suddenly have all this time and space and they don't know what to do with it. And then it's the, well, should I reach for a drink? And so it's then thinking, how can we fill that time with positive habits, not the negative habits that are going to give you the serotonin, the dopamine, the things that you are not getting from alcohol. And then we talk about how to better understand emotions, how to name emotions, how to process emotions and all of that. But that comes later. So really it's making not drinking the non-negotiable. Get to the point where you've started to discover new habits and passions and realize you can have passions and understand your limiting beliefs, get rid of those when it comes to alcohol and what you think alcohol gives you and what it doesn't give you, and all of that. And then as a transformational coach, we tend to focus on future. We go into the past, but we don't go deep into the past. So a lot of the deep trauma work I do then refer to therapists and people that can deal with that, because that's not my role. My role is to help you be future thinking and help you see that you can get to those goals. But I agree, there are people that do need that support, and I probably wouldn't work with them to start off with if I felt that that was the case, which is why I say I tend to work with grey area drinkers. But as we discussed before, grey area drinker is a spectrum, so again, it really does depend. But the emotional part is a really tricky one. It's a really tricky one, and a lot of people go back to drinking because that's one of the things that they just can't cope with, having to actually sit and process those emotions. So I give people tools to help them do that.
Well, I think with AA, when you say people don't know what to do with their time, I think this is why you see people who are literally, because I've been asked the question, when are you going to stop? Like, well, you don't. So there are people that I know that my friend Rick is 70 years old and he's been sober like 35 years. Actually, I think it might be 37. And I mean, he was in the rock industry, rock bands, like hardcore, and he got sober at like 33, hardcore drugs, alcohol, everything. It's crazy. And he stayed in the business, but he went to meetings. And I think that that's what people do with their time. There are what I guess would call career AA people, but it's a world. It is a lifestyle. There's AA for young people and they have dances and socializing and it's community. And so at the end of the day, you cannot do this alone. Working with a sober coach, but you got to also have a community. Find your like-minded people. There are like-minded people who aren't drinkers out there. And whether it's someone who's never had a drink, just doesn't care to drink, or who did have some sort of alcohol dependency. The range is wide and it's varied, right? But they exist and they're really cool people and they have a lot of fun and it can be this glorious and amazing life. And I've transitioned to AA was really important to me. My husband asked me the other day, there's a meeting right across the street from us. So convenient. And he asked me the other day, he's like, you haven't been in a while. Why is that? And I'm like, well, honestly, it's not that I feel I'm just going to go as needed because that's like going to I mean, you should go to the doctor every year and get checked up and make sure. But I don't think with AA it's necessarily like that. But I've learned to also prioritize things. I'm not in a position right now where I feel I don't think about it. I just don't think about it. So and it seems like every Thursday when that meeting is, there's something that's come up and it's my son's over or it's family oriented and my sobriety is my number one priority. But my family right now, they're my number one priority. And if my son's coming over for dinner, I'm not going to leave and go to an AA meeting. I spent years doing that. And I'm also starting to explore. Have you heard of She Walks Canada? I actually had Lindsay, the founder, on my podcast a couple weeks ago, and it's a different way. They actually have certified therapists and different types of facilitators, if you will. And
Mhm.
Lindsay is also one. And it's not AA driven, but they have online meetings and you can actually pick your person and it's all free. So I'm not saying you don't need a sober coach because you do, but I think in conjunction with that, this is a community. So if you don't have a community, you can join. You just go to shewalkscanada.com and there are meetings different days of the week with a specific person, if you will. So there are lots of other options. But I do think we all need people to hold us accountable in life. We all do. It's why therapists see therapists. It's why coaches have coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is well known that the opposite of addiction is connection, it's community. And
Right.
what I've loved is over the past 3 and a bit years now, and it will be 4 years in November for me, not
Yeah.
drinking, the alcohol-free movement. You go onto
Oh,
social media, there's so many Facebook groups and coaches and
it's
everything
unbelievable.
that it's really growing. And maybe it's just because I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by it. It's probably not in the grand scheme of
No,
it.
there was nothing. Do you know what I was doing when I got sober? I was listening to a podcast that was a recording of an AA meeting, and some of them were like 15 years old. I am not joking. Like someone recorded it
Um,
on their phone.
yeah,
There were no other podcasts.
yeah,
There
yeah.
just weren't.
So it is
It's
amazing
very
how much
different.
it's grown. And so people can find community easily. And to your point, is find the people that work for you, find the community and the
Hmm.
connections that work for you, and follow people. And there's so many alcohol-free influencers around and podcasts and Quit Lit as
Yeah.
well. And there's just lots out there now. There's been this, and I'm sure it still exists, there is a huge stigma around sobriety. And a lot of people choose
Hmm.
not to do anything about it, even though they know deep down that life could be better in some way,
Yeah.
emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, in all ways. They
Hmm.
know that, but they choose to not do anything because they don't want to be associated as
Mm.
hitting rock bottom or being an
Yep.
alcoholic or anything like that. And so
Hmm.
that's why it's so important that we let go of that stigma because, to your point, it doesn't matter how people are alcohol free, sober,
Hmm.
whatever word you want to use, alcohol conscious.
Hmm.
Ultimately, that doesn't matter. The fact is that all of us, we're not drinking and we're all living better lives
Yeah,
for it and we're all better people for it. Full
exactly.
stop. That's it. And
Yeah.
so if you can get over that,
Yeah.
and you know deep down that actually it's probably, regardless, you could be having 2 glasses on the weekend, but you know it makes you feel like crap. You know it's
Yeah.
impacting you in some way.
Yeah.
Just make the decision. Choose
Yeah.
to take a break and see how it feels and do 21 days, do 30 days, do whatever it is that
Yeah.
kickstarts it. But don't feel afraid because you're worried
No,
about what people will think because it just gets worse.
it does. And let me just tell you, so I didn't come out with my problem until I was on a friend's podcast. 3 years sober.
Wow.
I didn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about it on social media. I didn't do anything.
Mm.
And just keep in mind, if you think about the timing, I turned one, my first year sober anniversary was 3 days into lockdown.
Gosh,
So,
yeah, of course.
so think about the timing on
Yeah,
that.
wow. Yeah, so
So,
how did that? Because again, I didn't actually,
yeah,
yeah, my brain's obviously not working so well
no,
this evening at 8 o'clock. But
yeah,
of course, so
yeah.
that's when everyone ramped up their drinking. You were a year in. So of course your husband was probably thinking, actually,
And I mean, liquor
we don't.
stores, and I mean, we have Target right across the street from our house. I know
Yeah,
you don't have Target in the UK, but that's a big thing here. It's 2 blocks from my house,
yeah,
and they have alcohol.
yeah,
And you couldn't get your hair done. You couldn't do a bunch of other things, but for
no,
God's sake,
yeah.
I saw people. So I live in the city, right downtown Chicago, in the area called the West Loop. I actually saw a guy, probably a dad, with his wagon for his kids full of alcohol. Alcohol increased by 640%. 640%.
Yeah,
Bars, you could get, I don't know what it was like where you are, but bars, you could go and buy alcohol from bars and get it to go
wow.
because they had to stay open. They were trying to sustain their financial situation. So you think about really, I don't really talk much about the pandemic, but I think about the government and the regulations. That was a massive fuck up. Like, what the actual hell were they thinking? They wanted
It's,
women far more worse than
yeah,
men because the
yeah.
women were the ones educating the children.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
it's a huge problem. Absolutely.
oh my God.
And it was probably the perfect opportunity to talk about health and all the good things you could do
Right.
from a health perspective to improve
Yep.
your health to because obviously
Yeah.
it was so sad and tragic, but a lot of the people were either obese or were
Mhm.
overweight or had some sort of medical issue.
Yeah.
You would have thought instead of saying go and get some booze, you would have been thinking, okay, the gyms aren't open, but do some exercise indoors or go for a walk. That wasn't the message. The message was
Yep.
everything's closed, but alcohol's essential. And
Yeah.
that is it's
Yeah.
an essential service. And
So,
that's
yeah,
just the wrong message.
the wrong message. So, I have watched a man over the last 4 years probably lose 200 pounds. He started walking during the pandemic, and I have
Mm,
a dog. So, I walked all the time
mm,
without a mask
mm,
outside, and I just stayed away from people. I
yeah,
walked miles and miles and miles and miles with my dog.
yeah,
That's what people should have been doing. And a lot of people did.
exactly.
I mean, thank goodness the adoption centers were like empty because everyone was getting a dog or a cat or whatever. But I watched this man walk and
Mm,
walk. And that should have been, hey, maybe there should have been a
mm,
discount code for green.
mm,
I'm making this shit up. Greens.com or green
mm.
juice. Oh my gosh, there just should have been. I mean, think
They
it
missed a trick. They
through.
absolutely missed a
Oh,
trick. You're right. And but everyone did it. So because I stopped in the November of 2020,
yeah.
but it was the only thing that I felt you could do because you're getting all these messages from the mums in school and saying we deserve wine and we deserve gins and
Yeah.
it was just
And so for
the
you, it's interesting. I had
society
my year
culture.
and you stopped.
I
So that's like
stopped.
a whole nother freaking badass thing to do.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah,
not doing this. I'm going to go in the other direction.
yeah,
That
yeah,
takes a lot.
yeah.
It takes a lot of gumption. It
Mm,
takes a lot of mental fortitude for
mm.
you to have done that. That's
Wow.
incredible.
Thank you.
Incredible. I just want you to know, like, that's
Oh, bless you.
amazing.
Thank you.
So, I
Thank
mean,
you
you
so
think
much.
about if
Yeah.
you can do that, if I can make it through.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a friend who died during the
Oh
pandemic.
my
She
gosh, I'm
died, left
sorry.
3 kids behind, drank
Oh my
herself to death.
goodness.
So, don't say any of this lightly. Like, I've seen some
Yeah.
stuff
Mm,
and have experienced some that was traumatic.
mm,
I mean, think about, oh my God. Yeah. Terrible. And
mm.
so, I mean, if you have the right community, now you can have a coach like Dupe, you can do this and don't be scared to talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're
Uh,
young, sober in Central Park, I just interviewed her
oh
for my
yeah,
podcast. Oh my God.
she's fab.
She's
Yeah.
hilarious. We spent
Yeah.
like 2 hours on the phone together. She's
Yeah.
amazing. And same thing. She lost 100 pounds, started
Yeah.
walking Central
Yeah,
Park.
she
That's how she started walking.
unbelievable. Yeah,
She's
the
unbelievable.
before and after photos were amazing. Yeah.
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 So just, you don't have to be later on in life.
No, not at all.
It can be early on.
You can
And
make
there's
a
a whole,
choice.
she kicked off Soberfest here in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And I was always someone, it was very triggering for me. When everyone was talking about mocktails in the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, this is so triggering for me when the world was coming out with like NA tequila and NA wine, and they had like one canned cocktail at that time. Now I think very differently about it. If that's what gets you to be a non-drinker and helps keep you alcohol free, 100% go for it. I think that's amazing. But if it starts to trigger you, like if you're drinking a case of non-alcoholic beer a night, I would probably go back to Dupe and say, I think I need to address this because I don't think that this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. Although I'll tell you,
What makes
I
me
drink about 6 of these a day, sparkling water.
what
Um,
makes me laugh is that it's so funny because it's one of my recommendations that you should try alcohol-free drinks because it's again a way of tricking the brain by having alcohol-free drinks, and a lot of people do it, but I always get these pictures of look how much wine's in the bottle. I've only had a glass and the whole bottle would have been gone normally. And so it's a completely different
yeah,
thing, but I understand it does
yeah,
trigger some people, but
yeah.
it
But
helps
helps
people.
so many people. So in New York City, Rachel is trying to get actual branded alcohol-free drinks, mocktails and things into restaurants. That's something we don't have here in Chicago. You can go get a mocktail, but
Yeah,
not an actual like something with adaptogens and things in it.
right.
So that's what she's doing. And it was really fascinating to see her at Soberfest and see all the different brands and all of that out there. Dak Shepard actually who has the Armchair Expert, one of my favorite podcasts. He has his own NA beer out there now. So if that's what keeps you sober, then more power to you. So
Mm.
yeah.
Okay, so why don't we talk about your podcast, Sharing Out
Oh,
Loud?
thank
You've
you.
gone on to do amazing things. So tell
Oh,
me about
you're
that.
so sweet. Thank you. By the way, I feel like I went from like being like almost like this sobby, like I'm crying in the beginning. Now I'm like full of energy again. And that's all because of you. I love you so much.
Oh,
So at the beginning of the pandemic, I wanted to start a podcast and I always knew it would be Sharing Out Loud. Always. That has been the name since
wow.
the first thought that went through my head because there was nothing else out there. I'm listening to freaking AA meetings that are 25 years old that were recorded on somebody's, I don't even know, like those camcorders back in the day. I don't know what it was. The sound was terrible, but I was desperate. So that's what I was doing. I was doing that before the pandemic too, like listening, like the year before,
That's
my
good.
whole year before. So in addition to meetings, I was listening to meetings as I walked my dog. And people's stories back then were what helped keep me going. So I thought, well, gosh, this would be really cool. Everybody's at home. I could learn how to do this. And then the fear set in. I'm like, oh, who, me? And you know what came into my head? Back in the day in advertising, there was a woman, Twitter had just come out. People were like, what the hell is this thing? What's going on? What is this? And I was like, oh, maybe I should sign up and check it out. And this creative director turned around and looked at me and said, what do you have to say? What would you tweet about? Oh,
People are so cruel, and people say things just without
terrible.
even thinking.
Literally, no one was even tweeting. It was just getting
Oh,
started. And she had the
it's so
audacity. Yeah,
mean.
I know. I
And
know. And that,
that says so much about her, though, than it does about you. But then you would have internalized it and
oh, obviously, I still think about it. It's terrible.
let it
It's
go.
terrible.
Let it go.
So every once in a while it comes up, right? So, well, what do I have to say? What do I have to say? Oh, it's still there. Share out loud is what originally it was going to be. Anyway, long story short, Judy Arizosa, we were talking one day, and she's a friend of mine. I've known her for a while through a company that we both worked for, and she's 60 something year old, badass, health, fitness, nutritionist, all the stuff. And she has a podcast. And she said, let's just catch up one day, not to talk to me about anything. And she didn't know that I was a recovering alcoholic. And I blurted it out. And she said, do you want to be in my podcast? I was like, okay, sure. And then I did. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done?
I'm
Nobody knows.
so
Oh
I've told
my God.
everyone.
So, hey, world, guess what? I'm a recovering alcoholic. And hey, some of my closest friends, I've never talked to you about this. I better warn you. Oh, yeah. So that's what happened. So, and on her podcast, I said that I wanted to do a podcast, and months went by and I still didn't do it. So finally, one day I just sat down and said, oh, shit, I just got to do this. So I sat down for 6 hours and I figured it out, watched some videos, did some tutorials, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this messy, but I don't think I want to do it all in sobriety anymore. There are lots of other podcasts for that. Yes, I want to have this. I I want it to be a platform, absolutely, because I love people like you and so many good stories out there, and I love the community part aspect of that, and getting people connected.
Yeah.
But I wanted it to be a space for women to tell their stories, not just about how they went alcohol free or sober or whatever you want to call it. So I wanted it to be stories of people who have overcome big things, people who want to use it as a platform for, doesn't even matter whether it's you were in a job that you hated and you pivoted. My friend Kara was Google and Twitter and all of these things, and now she's a Reiki master, and she's actually just opening her own yoga studio and Reiki rooms, and it's going to be like a wellness studio.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Or my friend Becky, she's the one that I was telling you about who does the hypnotherapy and all of that. And she is on recovery from an eating disorder and getting that story out there, especially for teens, young women, all of that. It could be anything. I've had other people who have been on sexual abuse or emotional abuse. I mean, any story that I go, you are such an incredible human. You're a badass. You were able to get out of your head and rise up like a frickin' phoenix.
Yeah. I love
And similar to AA stories, we, especially as women, need to hear other women being brave.
Yeah.
I have another friend who was on, she was diagnosed with bipolar, and she came out and talked about that. I mean, so many stories of just brave women who aren't in Hollywood, they're not famous, whatever, like just real stories to help make that connection, to tell somebody out there, oh my God, I think I might have hope now. There might be hope for me, regardless, like I said, of what it is, whether it's trauma related or whether it's just you have an idea, whether it's you having an idea. I became alcohol free and now I want to be a coach and this is what I want to do and this is amazing and I want to pivot. So exciting. All of those things. So sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're mixed with a little bit of both. It's kind of all over the place, but it's been a lot of fun, and I just love being a platform just like you have here for women specifically on mine, to be able to share their stories.
It's so powerful. And it's what you said about giving people permission to be brave and to realize that they've got hope as well. Because I think
Yeah.
courage is something that if we can only step into it and take that first step, whatever that is that makes you feel like you're having to use courage and be brave, generally on the other side of that is something amazing. And so through your podcast, you're doing
Oh, thanks.
amazing work, just inspiring and helping other people to be inspired. So thank you. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you. Well, as we come to the end, I always ask my guests, what does thriving alcohol-free mean to you? So
Oh,
I'd love to hear your
ah,
perspective.
oh my gosh, I'm gonna get all emotional again. Ah, see what you do to me?
I don't mean
You
to.
know, no, this is a good thing. You're like Oprah. Like, oh, she just gets to everybody. Okay, so I mean, I think I wake up every morning knowing that I'm gonna wake up, and I don't even know how to explain it. I wake up and I'm just okay. I'm good. Partially because I don't wake up a job that I hate. I mean, that's another story, but I am no, oh my God, this is going to sound so cheesy, shackled by the chains of alcohol, but it's true. I'm no longer handcuffed
It's
by the
true.
chains of alcohol, but it's true. So, okay, here's what it means to me. I can show up. I can show up for my immediate family. I can show up for my dog who's over there sleeping in the sunshine. I can show up for my parents who have given me everything. My mom has Alzheimer's. I
Mm,
can go back and forth, thankfully, with the job that I have, back and forth to Michigan. It's like a 2 hour and 15-minute drive. I can do that and know that I can be present for them. I can grocery shop, I can cook, I can take care of them, I can clean. I can be present and there for anyone that needs me. And I know I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to be able to do it all over again. It
mm,
just means that I can show up, and I can show up for me too.
yeah. And that's really important. You need to show
Hmm.
up for you as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I love that answer.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for being the most amazing guest.
Thank,
You're just
thank you for
incredible,
having me.
Heather. So we will connect again, and yeah, look forward to speaking to you again soon. But
You
thank you.
too. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, thank you, Heather. Thank you so much for being on, and thank you for sharing so vulnerably and just so nicely. Really appreciate it. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. It was a bit of a different conversation, but also I hope it was helpful for you. And I wanted to say that they talk about when's the best time to plant a tree, and many people would say 10 years ago, but when's the next best time? Tomorrow. So if for whatever reason you think that it might be worth you taking a break and that life could be better in some way, physically, emotionally, spiritually, or mentally, then you don't need to wait. You don't need to wait until you hit a rock bottom or until you feel like you have to stop drinking. Why not just take a break and see how you feel, and then see what happens over the time that you take a break, and whether you want to then extend that. Don't wait until you have to, because there's no time like now. So if you're listening to this, you're probably curious, you're probably thinking, well, maybe I would like to take a break. And so do it. Don't wait. Do it today. Anyway, I hope you found that conversation helpful and you enjoyed it. And yeah, I am really looking forward to seeing the people that have signed up for the masterclass later today. If you would like to join them, then as I said, feel free to use the link below and join us. And yeah, I can't wait to meet you. I'm really excited about doing it. And I really want to share some knowledge and some tips and resources with you. And I think it'll be really helpful for you to join, especially if you have recently taken a break or you are curious about taking a break. And if you're a little bit down the line and you are finding you're still not quite enjoying being alcohol free, or you're feeling you're still depriving yourself, then also join us, because I have some hints and tips to share with you. Okay, well, if I don't see you on the masterclass later today, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my signature group coaching program. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.